you guys are raising money to put behind good candidates that you can then go get good legislation that's going to protect family and kids.
Yeah, and so for us, the way we view it is when we filled that gap, we had to let these guys know who are running for office, you have a team behind you.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Vox Valdez podcast. I'm super stoked. We have Anthony Labruna here from America Principles Project. I always feel like I always want to add like American Founding Principles Project, so like just random stuff.
Yeah.
But it's amazing what you guys do, because I mean, if you're familiar with the Family Proclamation, it's almost that, but in legislation, not just connected to like LDS people at all. It has nothing to do with LDS people. It just is purely about protecting the family.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was like too tangenty.
No, that's a good, like, I like the, I mean, we're in Utah right now, right?
Uh-huh.
So the Family Proclamation is like, very big with the LDS Church. But APP is a group that, if you think about special interest groups, you have big tech, you have big tobacco. We are filling that gap. APP's role is the big family, right? So we are the special interest group for Americans and their families and all their loved ones. So that's kind of how we view ourselves. That's what we're portraying. That's what we work on. Our president, Terry Schilling, he calls us, we want to be the NRA for families, right? Their model is very successful. And so we're kind of copying a little bit of that. And then we fill in that gap with the big family pack that we got going on.
And he's a good example. Doesn't he have like 7 kids or something?
Terry's got 7 kids. I was just on a phone call with him at this Eagle Forum, and he said he's going to shoot for twins next time. So I gave him some guidance. I'm a triplet. And so I was recommending next time you do it, get a couple multiples in there. It makes it a lot faster. It's easier. But your wife might not love you as much after that.
Wait, you're a triplet? So do you have like older, younger siblings?
No, I'm just us 3. It was us 3 and done. And that's being a triplet's what really brought me into politics. So I got involved in politics like at 16.
I was going to say at like 16 months.
No,
when you're like fighting over.
And what's funny is like my brother and sister are in politics now. So my sister is a producer for Megyn Kelly. My brother worked with me at the White House, and then now he's doing his own venture. He was doing stuff with the transition. He was on the Trump campaign this last cycle doing advance. And so, yeah, we're all kind of now in politics. My brother's, I would say he's a former pro athlete, college athlete, was a QB, played football down in Southern Miss in Mississippi where Brett Favre went. And so after he got done with like football, he was like, well, what do I want to do next? And I was like, come join politics. It's pretty fun. And so, but I got involved like when I was 16, and I started with our local county, and I was like, it all stemmed from one thing. Being a triplet, my mom was a little bit older when she had us, and the doctors were really pushing to reduce her pregnancy. So like back in 1997, that's just a fancy term for an abortion. And so I heard that, and I was like 13, 14 when I heard that story. And I was like, this is what I'm going to dedicate my life to.
So they mean like just like take out like 1 or 2 of the babies?
Yeah, so basically...
I've never heard this
before.
The
mom's still pregnant, and the doctors came in and told my mom, we just don't know how healthy they're going to be. And by reducing by 1 or 2, you're going to have a healthy baby. And my dad was not having that. So my dad looked for the best doctors in California. He decided to go to Long Beach, which at the time was like the prenatal like spot in the state. And so we were born there. We were all born healthy. The only thing that was wrong with us, I had low sodium, and that was it. I was in the hospital for another day or 2. So if they had taken the recommendation to reduce, right, they would have killed 1 or 2 healthy babies. So it's a weird term. I mean, you don't hear it a lot, but back in 1997, that was the term for an abortion from a doctor, someone who's sworn an oath to protect life, and they're saying that to a new mother and father who are excited to have triplets, and it's kind of quite disgusting. But my dad's a great man, my mother's a phenomenal woman, and they raised us all great, and I think it's turned out pretty good.
It was worth it.
It was worth it. I mean, they got 2 sons out of it. We both worked at the White House. My sister's very successful. My sister was a USC, do you know college ball? Like USC, the Trojans, right? She was a song girl for them. And
Okay.
so she was in that, and then she was in the Annenberg School of, it's not production, but it's Annenberg. It's for like media, and
Uh-huh.
so she went there, and now she's with Megan Kelly, and she's doing great things there. And now I'm with APP defending the family, and Andrew's working with the White House.
So when you were like 13 and you were, I guess you found out about this, or
It's
did that make you want to like be like, well, I want to go protect
so
other lives, or
it got me thinking of like what did I want to do. I was not an athlete of the family. Definitely was not the one with that skill set. That was Andrew. But I knew I was like I didn't want to go be a lawyer. I wanted to go do something, and I was a huge history buff as a kid. Like my dad took us on all these amazing trips across the country to presidential homes. I've sat on 37 of the 44 presidents we've had, their doorsteps. And so that was my like my life growing up. I was a huge Civil War buff kid. I used to like go to all the reenactments.
like you go to like tours around to like their houses, or like
Yeah.
you
So,
just go like bounce around, or what?
well, you can go to George Washington's home. You can go to
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson, James Madison's, John Monroe's. Like their homes are available for people to go tour. Um, you have Theodore Roosevelt up in New York, FDR's. So you can go and take your kids and your families to these places and see these historic monuments to these men. Um, I know one of our staffers is from Nashville. Andrew Jackson's home is there, the Hermitage. I've been there, and so I geek out about that stuff. But for me, I was like, okay, I'm a huge history buff. I loved Reagan as a kid, and I was like, okay, what's this next step? And I asked my mom, I was like, I really want to go get involved in politics. So I applied, got an internship at our county board. And in California, it's a pretty big deal. Like our counties are the same size of congressional districts. So we're talking 300,000, 400,000 people. So I started really young. Went from there, started working for a state senator in high school around 18, 17, senior year. And I was like, okay, this is the path I want to go. And so I actually went to Iowa for college. And the reason I chose Iowa was because of the Iowa caucus and President Trump being there in 2016. So it lined up almost perfectly. And I did my service. I worked on the Trump campaign. And when I graduated, I was like, okay, I wanted to pursue the White House. I am the youngest appointee in Trump's last administration. I was 22, and I was running the Department of Commerce. So 400 plus political appointees, over 4,000 career appointees. So when I got started, like it was people were not happy to have me there. But I knew that I wanted to serve President Trump's in like a capacity at the White House that really pushed the Make America Great Again. And that's why a bunch of us young guys got hired. And I got ridiculed. I said, oh, no experience, nothing like that. I had worked for Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa, the oldest Republican senator, right? And I'd worked for two or three members of Congress in the state of Iowa. Then I worked for the state house. So I had a laundry list of experience. But the fact that I was 22, I was crucified for it. And I remember there was political articles on me. There's a Snapchat story that was like, "Good luck, DC." I was featured on that, and I was like, "Why am I just getting all this blame for being a young guy pursuing my passion?" Now, if it had been the Obama administration or the Biden administration, they would have been, "They're the new rising star. This is great for America." But no, because it was on the other foot, I was punished for it. So it's been a wild journey, and then it led me to where I decided I got out of the White House, and I said I was working for Senator Grassley as his finance director on his campaign in 2020, going into that reelect for him. And I was like, I've done this already. Like, what do I want to do? I want to go do something that's actually positively impacting communities. And I decided to run for state senate. So I was 24 running for state senate. That didn't work out, but I learned a lot of great things, met a lot of great people. And Terry Schilling, our president, I had just lost the race, and he was looking for a director of operations, called me up, started in October of 2022. And we've been doing some great things. Now I'm the executive director of ABP. We've seen ABP in itself grow so much in the 2 years that I've been there. We were at, $10 million in 2020, or excuse me, a little bit, 12 million in 2023. This year we're close to 19 million in 2024. So Before that, they were at 4-3. And what Terry and APP realized is that there was no one filling this gap for the family. And that's where we kind of came in. And our three big things are not issues that are sexy in politics. It's protecting kids online, protecting them from pornography, then protecting women's sports, which is common sense. And then our final thing is protecting kids from gender mutilation, right? What we're protecting, again, it's gender mutilation is just like a very nice way to put it. We're protecting kids from being carved up with a knife and hormones forced down their throat, right? So we're doing a lot of good work. And I think realistically with this election of President Trump, people don't realize just how positive of an impact it's going to be on the country.
Well, I think that's like you say, it's not a sexy thing in politics, but it's like that literally is the youth and like the next level of our country. Like, and it just is kind of wild because I think the gender mutilation, how you put it, you're like, it's a nice way. I'm like, that doesn't sound nice. That's some good marketing. That's that's good marketing. But there's more to it than just the actual act of the surgeries and the hormones, because people don't realize how much that branches into the education system and what's being taught in our schools, public schools. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg was just, have you listened to Mark Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan?
I started it. I got some good clips, but I haven't gone all the way through.
He started talking about how their main goal at Meta, and you might have some more insight on this. I was just like, is to protect kids. Like that's one of their main things is like, how can we protect kids? So they're putting in all of these different.
I think they're seeing the writing on the
safeguards.
wall, right? Just how far we've gone, and especially for the left, right? When we're coming to an election, President Trump wins, and you have Democratic members saying, we've gone just a little bit too far. Maybe, we're out of touch here. I think that's where Meta, and obviously now that Elon Musk owns X, or, former Twitter, you're seeing this reaction of people wanting to go back to traditional values and actually solve the problems at home. And so I don't know if he's going to actually come through on it. I mean, we'll see what happens on Facebook. It seems like he's kind of turned around personally on his viewpoints for a lot of his policies and personal beliefs too.
Well, it's like he's just hanging out. Like, so I think there's a lot of people like this. Like, I think everybody wants to be accepted and everyone wants to feel like they're a cool kid and they have a seat at the cool kid table.
He's definitely dressing like it now.
Yeah, and
he's changed his style.
The thing is I feel like he's just is a nerdy guy, and I don't know how much of the social network's true.
Yeah,
but he just seems like someone that's always been trying to fit in.
Yeah,
and now he's found this like place with UFC fighters and Dana White, and he's like, oh, I'm finally like, I'm with all the badasses. I'm super cool.
He's following Elon Musk's example, kind of, right?
Yeah. And so, like, I wonder if he just is like, well, this is what they care about. And for them to like me, I should, like,
I should get to that
follow
side.
the trend. And it's also the trend it's like not hard to look at, like, the data and be like, the majority of the country just voted this way.
Yeah.
So maybe we go that direction.
I think that's, he's looking at the writing on the wall. He's following Elon Musk's example. And he's seen like a positive reaction online probably to it. And so, I got to give him credit. Like, as a smart businessman, that's what you should do, right? So you got to give him credit for that.
So on this because you guys went all over the country, like looking for candidates and people to support and people are going to defend. But like, what were some crazy stuff that's happened? I'm sure you with these types of issues, you run into wild situations all the time.
You do. I mean, what's interesting is that it's not as wild as you think because so many people are with us on these issues. So this is probably the best, or I wouldn't say wild, but it's definitely one of the coolest opportunities we had. We put out a documentary this year on the woke military, right? It was focusing on what was going on with DEI and the trans issue inside our actual Department of Defense. You had all these guys getting free sex reassignment surgeries that our tax dollars were paying for. And so we dived in on that. We got some great opportunities. We interviewed Congressman Mike Waltz, who just got named to the NSA. Is it NSC? Where's he at now?
I don't know. Do you know Travis? Mike Waltz.
He was appointed by Trump recently. But we got, Congressman Matt Gaetz. We had Waltz. We had Annalena Paluma, who's a congressman from Florida. But we had some great people. And we had the cherry on the top of the cake was President Trump sat down with us. And Terry and I got down to Mar-a-Lago. We sat down with him for about 30 minutes to actually do the interview. And we had about 20 minutes with him after, just a small talk. And Terry got this picture, and when we make sure you get it, he's showing Trump the issues, and he's showing basically R3 and how the trans movement and the trans issue was the issue pulling most voters his way, right? And so the life issue is not an easy issue to attack. But for Republicans, they need to learn we need to go on the offense on a lot of this stuff. We have to write the narrative. And that's what we were kind of telling President Trump.
Good marketing, child mutilation.
Child mutilation is actually, in a sense, like the issue that won the presidency this year for us. That's what won 2024, right? He came out with that ad, "I'm for you, they're for they, them," right? And that was probably the most powerful ad of the entire election.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that with this election and with us winning the House, with us winning the Senate, we kept the House, we won the Senate, and now that we have the White House, we have the trifecta, and we heard a lot of that today. We have to hold now the members in the Senate and the House their feet to the fire, because I have a feeling they'll go soft on us because they want to keep the majority. But that's not the priority. We need to go full bore to make these issues, like the fact that the first trans congresswoman or man, I don't know which one he is, I think it's a he, wants to go into the women's restroom of our congresswomen. Like Nancy Mace and all these, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, they shouldn't have a man in their restroom. And so I praise Mike Johnson for making that a priority and basically fixing that. So we had Paula Scanlon with us for some of the women's sports stuff we were doing, and she went to the Senate with Terry, and we put on the thing, our restrooms, we're taking them back, and there's a clip on that online of Terry and her doing that together. So
that's sweet. So have you ever sit down with people, I don't want to say like on the other side, but
at times, I mean, in college I had friends on the other side. Most of that was respectable until about 3 months ago. Like, I don't hear from them anymore. Some of them, now the fascinating thing is, like, when I was at the White House and they beat us the first time, the amount of nasty texts I got were insane. Like,
I'm sure.
I got every curse word in the book. They're all yelling at me like rah, 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 like, they beat us. But after this election, it's crickets. But when you're sitting down with people on the other side, I think the biggest issue is that they don't see that this has gone too far, right? Like, we're now talking about children. We're talking about the next generation, and they're fine with pushing this. And we're talking about a $4.2 billion industry of them making money off our kids. And for us, right, $4.2 billion doesn't compare to what we saw today of the trillions of dollars the U.S. government is spending. But that's just the start. If they were to win the pro-life issue, there's not a doubt in my mind that all that money they put in to, win the pro-choice issue, if they were to reinstate Roe versus Wade, that money would flow straight into the trans movement, and they'd come after us. And that's an uphill battle that I don't think we could win. So with us winning, not only in the schools by like getting all these books out of the libraries, that's step one. Now we have the appropriate Congress and the White House. We have the power to go in place all these laws. Now, Trump's saying he's going to do it on his first day, all these executive orders. I think from what I've heard, he's going to do one on women's sports and then one possibly on the gender mutilation. We'll see what happens on the 20th. But those are only Band-Aids to fix the problem, right? The next president, if they're a Democrat, right, let's just say Trump holds these four and then we lose the next in 2028, that executive order can be switched like that. So we now have to push, and I hope Mike Johnson leads, and I hope Thune leads on this, to enact actual legislation that solidifies these laws, because it's a lot harder than most Americans think. And that's why Congress runs slow. It's supposed to run slow. It's supposed to be kind of a backlog of things. And that's why, with the opportunity we have right now, it needs to be Speaker Johnson's priority. and Majority Leader Thune's priority to get these laws passed.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like we can't just like be so focused on holding the majority, but we actually be focused on getting things done.
Yeah.
And that's like what I think for a lot of people that don't understand is like there's a lot of politics that just is maintaining a seat. Like the politician or whoever you elect, I'd say, and correct me, you know way better than me, but 80 to 90% of the job is just them trying to stay in that chair.
I would say for the House, right? For the House of Representatives, it's a 2-year term. You know, you have 365 days to legislate, and then, you know, you have recess and stuff like that to campaign. But then by that second year of your first term or your term, you're basically on the campaign trail again, right? And it's different for some members, right? So you have certain districts that are R+40, R+30. They really don't have to worry about an opponent unless they're like a rhino and they're not pushing the legislation the district wants. Then they're worried about that in the primary. But if you're a Republican and you're in a safe seat, you really don't have that process. But you have all these other seats like in California, some here in Utah, definitely in Virginia and Pennsylvania, where they're tight races all the way through. So if the Speaker Johnson wants to stay Speaker, he's got to let his people go home and campaign. So you're losing all these days and months to push legislation. So I think we were hearing earlier today from some members where their main focus is also keeping the majority in 2 years. Well, that's for next year. That's for 2026. For 2025, it's time to go govern, and we'll see if they do that.
Well, and I think the reason they don't want to do that for people that don't understand is when you come out on, I don't even think a lot of anything we're talking about should be so controversial for Republicans specifically.
It's not. You got Democrat lawmakers.
But like the issue is what they're saying is you might see us take some votes. You might see us having to work with other Republicans, but Republicans that are rhinos, and to maintain their seats when in reality they should be legislating the right legislation rather than so focused on holding the majority. But if they just did a good job,
Yeah.
they'd keep their seats anyways.
Well, it's why some legislation gets put to the floor and others don't. Like you'll have multiple members work on legislation and it'll be 2 different bills but on the same issue. One, and they say it has more teeth, which means if it is passed into law, that it would actually have more of an effect of what we want to happen. Where you have a bill with no teeth, you're passing it, and it's easier for a member who has to take a tough vote in a controversial district or a tough district for a reelect to take that vote. And so that's why you have these watered down bills come to the House floor, come to the committee, and that's why some of these really great pieces of legislation by some phenomenal members get trashed. So that realistically, that's a big problem. In the Senate, right? We talked about House. You have 2 years. In the Senate, you got 6. So having 6 years, it's a lot easier to work on more controversial legislation, like Mike Lee's Screen Act.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's going to continue it this year, but it's basically focusing on working with kids and so that their data is protected and they're not being targeted, right? So pornography and gambling are probably the 2 biggest industries that we'll see target young kids. You get ads for it. Like I know I get ads for it all the time on like DraftKings and sports books to go sign up and start sports betting. That's being targeted to 16-year-olds. They're trying to get them early. And the same thing for pornography. If you go on Facebook and you're scrolling through, you get all these pop-up ads for different things, right? So they're using that, and I think Facebook's trying to fix that issue, but it's on X, it's on any site they're searching, you'll see it pop up, and pornography is a real issue that we're going to face. Like for young men especially,
Mm-hmm.
it is going to get them hooked, and it's going to ruin our actual culture where young men are looking at pornography so much that why should they date? I think Japan has an issue with this where they are basically,
And China too.
China does too, right? They're trying to pull their young men out of these dark holes and just getting them to go on dates and like interact with real girls. Well, they'd rather focus on pornography and just look at that.
Well, it doesn't just affect like dating and relationships. It affects
Affects everything.
everything. You're not able to work as effectively. You're not able to focus on things. You get that dopamine rush so fast that it affects your hormone levels and can trash your hormone levels for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I think you're completely right. Like you're already seeing a huge increase in pornography and viewing of pornography. I think it's exponential year over year. So,
Well, just look at the movies and TV shows we got coming out, right? So,
well, it's actually, did you see the study that came out where it's like Gen Z said there was too much sex on movies?
yeah.
They're like, please put in less.
Well, I mean, how awkward. You go to a movie theater with your parents,
Yeah.
and there's all these random sex scenes in these movies now, and they're like pointless sex scenes. Like, what was there really a reason in the storyline to put a sex scene in there? No. Like, and so I think that's also part of it where Hollywood is taking advantage of this. And, we're seeing the fires right now. And I'll be honest, I feel bad for a lot of the Californians who are being affected. But you see all these major Hollywood stars who've been pushing this narrative. I think it was a couple of days ago, or maybe it was the day before the fire started. They had some award show, and the amount of times they thanked God was 0, right?
That's wild.
That's wild.
It used to be every person.
Every person used to thank God. I think there was 3 times for mom, and then like 11 times for like other actors and family members. So, but like you were seeing in our culture, God is being stripped out of it, and people are placing in stuff like pornography, sports betting, addictive things, like even smoking and all this stuff with Zyn and e-cigarettes, right? Like they're all targeted at our young children. Like they're targeted between the age ranges of like 12 to like 16. If they get them during that point, they basically got a customer for life, right? And it's getting even more wild. Like we had our director of policy go down to Texas and a couple of other states to go testify on all these issues that are happening on porn and why we need to put in. And the law we're working on is pretty simple. If you want to go onto a pornographic website, you should prove that you're over the age of 18. Louisiana is already doing it.
So how do they do that? You like take a picture of your ID or?
So there's a couple ways. Like Louisiana has like a virtual ID, so you can basically verify through that. I know it's in law. Governor Youngkin signed the bill in Virginia. So if you're going to let's just use some random porn site to get through the first wall, you have to use your ID to verify. And I know the biggest issue on this is data, right? Are they collecting your data on that? But from the laws that we're seeing be put into place, it's literally just for verifying, and then it has to be dumped and scrubbed right after.
So the one question with that is like it's still so easy to access on like social media. For example, like on X, I think there's like no rules whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like you can go find pretty much anything you want to find on there. There's like people being murdered. Like
There's beheading
I've been
videos.
like scrolling through and I'm like, what the?
Yeah.
Anyone could just find this.
Yeah.
And like X is so interesting because it makes me really think of like what does freedom actually mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like the wild, wild west right now on there, it seems.
There has to be in place some regulations. Now, I think the thing we're seeing with X is it's a reaction to just how restrictive they were during COVID, right? All the stuff that they would take down. And
Under
all the things
previous management.
under previous management, right? So I think Elon's letting it run. I don't see it being a long-term thing that he's going to allow for all this stuff to be on X. He might. We'll see. But I think the big focus right now for APP and American Principles Project is that we start in the States and we start limiting all these porn companies from getting to our kids. I think that's the first step. I think social media is the next step. We're working on something called a Screen Act as well, where it's basically in order to download certain apps, you have to have parent approval. And we'll see how that. I think we're going to try to take that to Utah this year. We're going to try to meet with some legislators, talk about it, and see if we can get something on the books during their legislative cycle.
Well, this is a great place to do it. I think like what's always been so crazy to me about all of this, I'm like really big on let people decide and do whatever they want to do. Like if you're an adult and you want to go look at porn all day, every day, I mean, I don't think that's good.
Yeah.
But I mean, hey, that's your call. If you want to be
That's your decision.
Yeah, if you want to become a girl or like get all the surgeries, I'm sorry you're making that decision for yourself. It seems like a terrible decision to make, but you're an adult. Go do what you want to do. But what's crazy is that people will argue that we should do that to kids when it's like, you can't get a tattoo until you're 18 or 19 or 20, 21,
Yeah.
or you can't go drink. You can't go, there's so many things you can't do, and literally universally accepted in every other state that is not nearly as bad, or not nearly as, the effects aren't as long term.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah, like, but you want someone to be able to make a decision to change their life forever
Yeah.
when they're kids.
They're kids. And I think a perfect example is Chloe Cole, right? She was pushed to go and get this the transitions and the hormones. I believe she just went on the hormones. But like that permanent damage to her during that.
How old? I'm not familiar with her story. Like, how old was she?
I think she was like maybe like 12, 13. I don't know off the top of my head, but I know
She was young though.
But yeah, but like you might have, like, we've all gone through it, like middle school, junior high. It's a rough time. It's not easy. Like, you're finding yourself, you're trying to make friends, you're going through puberty. It's quite difficult.
You feel ugly, especially probably if you're a girl.
Girls,
You can
guys,
imagine how hard it
you got
is.
acne, right?
Yeah.
And then to have this added on top, like, oh, maybe you're not supposed to be a girl. Maybe you're supposed to be a boy. And to a boy, maybe you're supposed to be a girl, right?
Maybe you don't know what you are.
Yeah, right. Maybe you're, an Apache helicopter, right? I know that's like kind of a joke they throw around, but it's serious. Like, teachers are doing this, especially in states like California, right? Like, I've seen all these things on TikTok.
What makes it worse is, are you familiar? You probably are, with the wheel of power, privilege and power, where they go through. There's like this wheel, and it's in textbooks, and it's this wheel that has, you go through and you fill in your different demographic information. So like, I'm male, your family's income status. Are you like lower class, middle class, high class? Are you Christian or Muslim? All the different things about you. And then at the end, it tells you like how powerful and privileged you are. And obviously the most powerful and privileged people are white Christian males.
Yeah.
And so what do they do? They're like, hey, and this is in the textbook. And like the next the paragraph, it's like, hey, it's okay if you're a white Christian or male. You can identify as any of these other things. And it gives a list of like 40 things, whether it's like LGBTQ plus whatever. And it gives them and that's the easiest one. It's to just be like, oh, I'm non-binary, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, but it's instantly teaching them like, what you are right now is toxic and bad. And so you instantly should take on something else that's more oppressed, and deny your oppressor identity.
Yeah. Well, also, on part of that, it's like, it's creating a victim culture, right? So on the other end, you have all these people and students who are looking at like, oh, well, they've had everything. I've had nothing. I'm a victim, right? So you put in this mentality of victimhood. It's not good for the next generation. Well, I want to bring up real quick, because you said, like, you brought up the textbooks, right? So that's in schools. The other thing they're putting in our libraries is pure, like, pornographic content in books for kids to get their hands on.
There's some that I saw this one of like this. I don't even want to say it. It's so bad. It's like embarrassing for me to even like, I'm like kind of blushing thinking about saying it, because you
don't have to say it.
It's so bad. Like, it just is. I've seen a few of these, and it's like, I don't even want to describe what's in the book.
Yeah.
It's so embarrassing for me to even talk about.
Well, like, these people are going to school boards and they're talking about this issue of what's in these books, and the school boards don't want them to publicly read it.
Oh, terrorists.
They're terrorists, right? They're
Take 'em
arresting
out.
people.
Yes.
They're kicking them out. Like, that is
But to your point, you're saying that parents will bring the book in the kids' library to the school board and say, hey, should we really have this book in here? Start reading it. And the school board's like, hey, stop reading that.
Yeah, they'll arrest them. They'll kick them out, right? Well, that's a forum for you to address your elected officials, right? They're being tyrants. And I think there's a lot of dads who've been out there where they started sending their kids and having their kids read it, because you can't kick a kid off the mic, right? You have to let them speak and read through. And so it's been very awkward for some of these school boards who are dealing with this. Now, the most like the book that's most well known is Genderqueer, right? And that for a long time was available in a lot of counties across the country, right? And you have to look at it as like, each school board can be different. And there's probably some phenomenal school boards out there who have not let that in the library. And that's great. That's good on them. But what about all these other schools in California and Oregon and Washington, these liberal, oases where, conservative parents don't have a say? And so I think that's another issue. And I know it sounds like Utah has taken the right steps to reelect or to elect new members to their statewide school board. And it sounds like that won't be existent in Utah anymore.
Well, that's
So
the hope.
that's the hope.
That's definitely the hope. But that's just the thing. Like, I've definitely heard people say that kids are going to find this out anyways. Like, if they want to go find those books, it's not like they're like out being advertised. But I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, sometimes they actually are being advertised.
Yeah.
And negative advertisement is advertisement. So they're like, what is this book? They want to go look for it. But I don't think what a lot of people understand is the education that's being given to their kids without them knowing about it. It's not that the books are just in the library, but
Yeah.
it's the availability for educators to go in and try to fill, and I've heard this, fill the space that the parents have left void. So
Yeah.
they're like, are envisioning your kid like, hey, they're not filled with information yet. Let me go teach them, or I like to say indoctrinate
It
them
is. It's indoctrination.
with these books and teach them that, hey, your parents are bad. Conservatism is oppressive.
Yeah. Well, this is my thought on it. I have a young nephew on my father's side, and I was talking to his mom, and I was like asking how everything's going. They go to the public school or public library every day for reading time in Chicago, and she noticed that when he's like crawling around, like pulling books off the shelf, he's grabbing like these big bright books. And guess what do you think they're all about? They're all about LGBTQ, being trans, right? And I think and this is just my thought process on this. I think that a lot of the colors and all that stuff are like they're done on purpose. Like, so it catches a kid's eye. They're like, what is this? They grab it off the thing, they open it up. So it's all, if you look, they're all like bright books, and they're supposed to be, sometimes they do dogs or cats or different animals, like to be like parents. So, two daddy parents, and it's like two elephants. I know I've seen some of those, like, and it's just like, I think it's a whole method to their madness, and hoping that we will not catch on to it. And we have. And so I think we're making a lot of strides in that. It's not over. And you honestly have to do something federally on this. And I think this is going to be an issue this next administration that Trump or Linda McMahon needs to take up, right? Doing a federal ban on all this. So that way, if you're a parent in Southern California, or if you're in LA County, and you're a conservative parent, you have a voice, right? You have President Trump working on your behalf, but most importantly, the new Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, which she's a tough cookie, right? Like, her husband and what he's done, I think she'll do great things there. So I hope that's going to be I think we're meeting with her this Monday. So we're going to bring that up to her and say, hey, please make this a priority and bring this in front of the president. Because I don't think, again, even if they just do an executive order, right, that's not going to be a perfect fix, right? I don't think legislatively, I don't think Mike Johnson.
No, you got to get it into code.
Yeah.
Like that's what I don't think people understand is, which I didn't really realize this until today either, is that the president can make pretty much any executive order that they want.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's up to Congress to turn it into law or to like really reject that. And the next president just shut it down.
Yeah.
And so until things are made into law, they go through the rigorous process to be made laws, then really there's no substantial change.
There's substantial change during the term of that presidency, right? So Biden,
but after that's over, then
yeah,
it can be done.
Trump's going to sign executive orders this year. He's going to sign a certain amount on day one. I have a feeling a lot of those are going to be focused on overturning what Joe Biden did to his presidency. He's just reemplacing his executive orders. And you're seeing that because it's a rare moment. A lot of times when you're a president, you get 2 terms, right? Very few times have we seen just 1-term presidents and then it switches hands to another party and then right back. So this is an opportunity to see us just why the executive orders are not going to be the perfect solution and they're not the permanent fix. And again, the legislation-wise, right? Mike Johnson and House leadership, right? I know they have a small majority, but with that majority, they have to do as much as they can in these 365 days because on day, 366, right? The new year in 2026, it's campaign time, right? The Senate, again, they have more time. the House doesn't. So while we have the House and why we have a majority, right? It's no longer just a one seat. I think it's 3 or 4 now. And then once they get Gates' seat refilled, it might be, I believe, 5. They got to use that time now to push through the stuff that President Trump deems important. And I'm going to say this. Social issues, right, won this last election. And I know they have to focus on the budget, but we're never going to be able to actually get our nation on the right path if we don't address these tough issues. If we want to hide from them, if we want to avoid them at all costs, it's going to be the downfall of the country, but it will also probably lead to the downfall of the Republican Party.
Well, people think you might be sounding extreme, but if you really go look through civilizations as a whole, like the history of the world
Yeah.
and civilizations, and you go look at when the pinnacle of that civilization was and what happened and what led to the downfall, in almost every single one, it was they started getting like these gender curiosity things and they started being soft
Yeah.
and being able to just relax and rest on their laurels. And they started with a lot of the same stuff, like these social issues. It isn't new. Like it's been something that was in Roman times that led to the fall of Rome because they got rich. They were at their pinnacle. Everyone was like, we're safe in Rome. No one's going to attack us. They're having these orgies and these gender fluid ideas. And then eventually the guys from Carthage came in and attacked them and they had to leave to Constantinople. And then the rest was history.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize that when you're saying this could be the end of like democracy, that's how they get you. They lull you to sleep. They lull you to sleep and they make you dependent on the government. They make you dependent upon the party and you're dependent upon them for finances, for your self-actualization. And then eventually they've taken over everything and we're Venezuela.
Yeah, and you get people who are relying on the state for food and income and all the necessities, right? You're lulling people to sleep, as you said. I think for the Republican Party, if we don't act while we have the power, I think a lot of conservatives and Republicans are going to lose faith in that leadership. And we might not get this chance again for another 8, 12 years. But with that being said, we're on this precipice of President Trump is back in office. There's a hope. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, right? So I think, and I know, right? I know that President Trump's going to do what's right by the American people. Not everyone's going to love him, right? That's okay. He doesn't care, right? He's a leader. He leads from the front. He's not shy, and they attack him, right? Like, oh, he's anti-everything, right? He doesn't take care of women. He doesn't like women. Well, look at who the first female chief of staff is, Susie Wiles. Did a Democrat do that? No. President Trump, a Republican, a conservative, put the first female chief of staff ever in history was a Republican. So how can they make all these claims about this man? He's not perfect, and none of us are. And I think a lot of people understood that this election and said, I'd rather go with him than with this woman who, Kamala, at the end of the day, Kamala's election and her race, she was a prop. Like, she was pushed in. There was no democracy in that side. There was no way for the Democratic Party to pick their next person because it was forced on them. And so what we're seeing is a true revolt against that thought process. And, God bless Joe. He's senile. Like, he needs to go home. I think what Jill did to him is that's elder abuse. And, I think that should be looked at, what the Democratic Party did, because I really don't think he was running the country for the last 2 years.
There's facts. Like, you go watch all those. I don't know how do they get those undercover videos? Because like they have like the videos of those staffers that are just like, yeah, I got the text from Joe, from his team, and I mean, he hasn't been alive for like 3 years, and like he's completely gone. Like, you can definitely tell like there's been a steep mental decline. Like, he can't even sit in meetings. He just gets this like glossy look over his eyes. So they have those recordings of his staffers literally saying that.
I think that had to be a little bit orchestrated.
I don't know how they get those videos of these people. Like, looks kind of like a hidden camera, but kind of looks like almost too good.
Well, I think the DNC wanted him out, right? The DNC was like, okay, we know we're not going to win with him. Like, even if it was Trump versus Biden, I still think Trump does just as well. I don't know the total off top of my head of his electoral votes, but I think he would have still won Pennsylvania. He won Wisconsin. He would have still done just as well against Biden. And so I think for them, they thought, okay, we have to save this election. What do we do? So I think the DNC kind of pushed him out and forced him out there. And with only so many months left in the election, the only default was Kamala. I don't think they could have done a primary. I think her vice presidential choice was a terrible pick, right? If you look at that, okay, Trump beat Hillary Clinton with Tim Kaine. Have you ever seen Tim Kaine? He looks a lot like Tim Walz, like side by side. There was an SNL skit about this. Tim Kaine comes on and he's, do you know who I am? And, these guys are playing fake Jeopardy. And the actor is like, no, I don't know who you are, basically. And they're like, but I do know Tim Walz. He's a very memorable guy. And he goes, well, actually, we have a side-by-side. And they look identical, right? And so if you look at that ticket, right, Hillary and Kaine, you have Harris and Walz. Trump beat a woman nominee and a male nominee for vice president, and he did the same there. Like, did they think that strategy was going to work? No. Like, I think what they are trying to do is also give a rebirth to their bench. I think they don't have a deep bench either. And I think, everyone was talking Shapiro at first from Pennsylvania to be the vice president. That didn't sit well with people.
And they would have burned him.
Oh, they would have burned him all.
That would have been, it's not his time yet.
Yeah. And so, one thing I would like to talk about is like all these California fires, right? Gavin Newsom wants to be president. There's no doubt about it. That guy is at every photo op that he can be at. And all these wildfires, I think, by Trump saying he needs to resign, I think that's just a move on Trump by basically tanking his presidential wishes. And so, Gavin Newsom's a bad guy, right? Like, the guy cheated on his wife with his best friend's wife, who was also his campaign manager. There's a great shot of when he was running for governor for the first time, where it was either lieutenant governor or governor, where while he was on the debate stage, one of his opponents literally said, if you can't trust him with his best friend's wife, how can you trust him to be your governor? Right? That's political satire. You feel like it's a moment from Veep.
Yeah. What's wild is people can't even look at to think, and this is where I'm like, is the left really this out of touch? And I just can't believe, I have a really hard time believing that people are stupid. Yeah. They're just idiots. Because I don't think, the more I've been around a lot of people in politics, I'm like, these people are smart. They know what they're doing. They're not idiots. They're doing what they're doing for a reason.
Yeah.
But it just is wild that this Newsom conversation keeps popping back up. Because you just go look at his track record with the state as a whole. Like, it's like a mass exodus from California. Yeah. And so it's like, hey, do you want the whole country to be California? So I'm almost feeling like the Democrat Party was like, hey, how about we just go burn our worst players and we just go sacrifice everyone that we just think sucks. Yeah. And let's just get them off the table. They're all our pawns. Let's go sacrifice.
They're clearing the table.
Yeah, let's get everyone off. And I think their whole plan this election was to lose. Like, okay, we're going to lose. Who do we want to get rid of and we never want to hear from again?
What did they decide to do? Like, I think they burned $1 billion during that process, right? Mm-hmm. That wasn't a smart move either.
No. But I'm like, there has to be a reason. So I'm like, the only thing that makes sense to me is they're like, so this is the one thing I think Republicans aren't as good at is that marketing and planning long term with elections per se, where I feel like the Democrats are really good at that. Is I think they're not even looking 4 years from now. I think they're looking 4 and 8 and 12 years from now, where they're like, let's get rid of everybody now. And they're game planning something that most people aren't even thinking about and putting the right pieces in place, hoping Trump does his thing, because Trump's very predictable, I think. He's going to do a lot of the things that they would think he's going to do. And they're like, okay, how can we market this, paint the right narrative to tee up a Shapiro or another candidate who they didn't want to get rid of this time around?
Well, I think part of that strategy is that they're always on offense. They're always moving the ball downfield. Mm-hmm. With us, and this is with a lot of our elected House members specifically, and I think some of our senators, we go on defense a lot of the time. And it's like, we should not be on defense, right? All these issues are winning issues, like overwhelming majorities in all these states, right? We took back...
It was like 80% of people don't think trans stuff should be pushed on kids.
It's like 81%.
Yeah, wild.
Right? Like
everyone agrees pretty much.
Everyone basically agrees except for some small factions. And so within their strategy, I also realized they don't have a deep bench because a lot of their players have already ran for president and didn't get, the results they wanted. And so, like Kamala Harris, you got to think about this. Joe Biden picked one of the worst polling candidates
of all
to be
time.
his Veep.
Yeah.
Who would ever do
What
that?
did she get? Even like 5% of the vote?
It was like 2.
Yeah.
She didn't clear. I know she didn't clear over 1% in Iowa for the caucuses. So the thing about the Republicans goes, we have a pretty deep bench. We have a lot of great players, right? You have Josh Hawley from Missouri. You got J.D. Vance, who's the vice president now. We have our newly elected senator from Indiana, Jim Banks, right? He's going to do some great things. Jim Banks was a congressman from Indiana. He's not a well-known name yet, but promise me that guy will. He will be a big-time player in the Senate. He's not easy to push around. He's a true conservative at heart. And just from some of our conversations with him and his staff, he's going to be fully supporting the president's agenda. And I think for us at APP, we're super excited to see that. On top, we're also seeing Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania, right? A race we should have lost to an incumbent of so many X years, Bob Casey, right? So with this new, fresh, and then we have in Ohio replacing, we're going to get to replace Vance, right? But we have Moreno coming in.
Yep.
So we are seeing this new Senate, and we're going to have a lot of people on the bench. And when I say bench, right, think about it like this. If you're a sports team, you have a guy retire who's an MVP. President Trump, unfortunately, in 4 years, has no choice but to retire from politics unless he wants to go run for the House or the speakership, one of those two. But for him, he's going to have to retire, and you have to replace that star player. And so we have a very good bench as of right now. And I'm forgetting people like Governor Youngkin.
Well, there's so many that are there that what I think is appealing is they're not just your lawyer, politic people that have been wanting to be in politics. Maybe they have wanted to their whole lives, but they're not like your traditional political routes like Bernie Moreno, who had his businesses and went from there. And you have these conservatives that are winning because Bernie Moreno be a Democrat that had been in office
for quite a long
time. And that's what I think is so exciting is there's good candidates that I think are representative of the American people, but they're winning in areas that typically are left-leaning areas and flipping those seats over. And so it just shows that like this is what people want.
Well, if you look at the Democratic side, a lot of them are cookie cutter, same type politicians, lawyers. You get some, wealthy individuals running. They take their seats. I guess Tim Walz is a football coach, right? But we have our own football coach, Coach Tuberville, right? We have a very diverse Senate and a very diverse House. They're not all the same lawyer types. You have, Jim Banks is a veteran. You have J.D. Vance, who's a veteran. You have Dave McCormick, who's a businessman. You had Eric Hovde in Wisconsin. I think he came close. I think he should run again. But he's a businessman. You have even here in the Utah Senate election, right? You had guys like Jason Walton. He's a businessman. Like they're not, and they're, what's funny is they all come from like they pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, right? And so I think a lot of Americans resonate with that. Where with the Democrats, it's just the same type, right? You get a lot of angry feminist women who are just screaming about the patriarchy and how bad it is, right? Like AOC. Who's
Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift. They all want to go see Taylor Swift, right? But yeah, so you're seeing this kind of resurgence in the Republican Party that we didn't have when Trump won in 2016. We're getting rid of Romney, hopefully here in a couple, what is it, a year?
No, he's gone.
He's gone now officially.
John Curtis replaced him.
John Curtis, yes. John Curtis replaced him. Mike Lee, we hope, that's another member. Like, that's another great member, Mike Lee, right? You have a strong conservative who looks at the Constitution. To follow the Constitution is the rule of law of this land. You don't get that a lot with the Democrats. They don't like to follow that, right? We beat up John Tester. I'm blanking on the guy's name who won in Montana, but he beat Tester. And that was a great victory, too. So he's another great pickup for the U.S. Senate for Republicans.
So overall, with what you guys are trying to do is you guys are raising money to put behind good candidates that you can then go get good legislation that's going to protect family and kids.
Yeah, and so for us, the way we view it is when we filled that gap, we had to let these guys know who are running for office, you have a team behind you, right? In 2016, there was a bathroom bill, and that governor lost his reelect by like 10,000 votes. But the thing that we learned from him was that there was nobody there when he needed them. And that's where we came in, right? So we come in, we're behind these guys 110% during their elections, and then we're working with them on the legislation on the back end to get these, common sense laws passed. And, right now our three being women's sports, protecting kids online, and the gender mutilation stuff are winning. Like, it's popular.
Mm-hmm.
And we're always looking down the road for the next thing. And realistically, I tell them this: no matter what happens in politics, everything comes back to the kitchen table. Everything's a family issue, and that's what I've been saying to our supporters, to our donors, and to our legislators that we work with. So they know that that's our main priority, is keeping these guys in office, letting them they have a team behind them that won't let them won't hang them out to dry. And so that's kind of our concept at APP, and it's working. In 2016, that's kind of when it started, and now we've grown from a $2-3 million org to almost 20 million. And this year we're shooting for 30-40 million, because we know in Virginia, if we lose Virginia, that's not good. Whoever's going to replace Youngkin has to be just as good, and I think Winsome Sears can do that. And then as well as New Jersey. New Jersey's going to be tough, but I think it's doable. You have a lot of donors that we've heard from the state of New Jersey saying, we want, like, they just put so much money into the presidential, and they're doubling down. They're like, we want to take New Jersey back. We want to be the next Pennsylvania. And so I think these are all positive signs for the country.
So if people want to get involved, they're passionate about these issues, what do they need to do?
Come visit us at AmericanPrinciplesProject.org.
Great Instagram.
Great. APP 1776. Go see our president, Terry Schilling. He's easy to find. He's on Tucker all the time. When he was on his show, he was on Laura Ingraham for like 9 weeks straight talking about the election. And then obviously, if you can, donate, support us. $5, $25. Reach out to our team. Call our office. We'd love to hear from you guys on different issues that you think we should start covering for the family. But also, we have all these amazing events for these different members sometimes. And if we're doing that, get on our list, our email list, and we'll email our newsletter and all the information that you can do to help the American family. But I will say this before we call it or close it out. The most important thing right now is these next 100 days. So all the donations that are going to be coming in over the next, 90, 80 days are going to be focused on establishing President Trump's pro-family agenda. So that's our big thing right now. So these next 100 days, we're focused on ingraining that into his administration. And I think we have some great cabinet members, which we didn't really get to talk about, but we have really a bright future for the next 4 years.
Well, so go donate. What I love about what you guys are doing, at least for me, is on Instagram, you guys actually do good information.
Yes.
It's just is so packed full with facts, because I think people get bought into so many opinion-based things, but you guys are posting actual facts, studies, statistics, things that are actually effective that people can go home and be like, wow, I didn't know that.
We're posting the hard content, right? Like, we're not just saying, oh, this is what's in libraries. We're showing you what's actually in the library. We're reading the books. Terry has this thing on social media where it's, Terry's story time. And he picks a book that's in one of the school districts that, a parent's written into us about, a caller's told us about, and we go find it and we're like, okay, well, let's publicize this because it needs to be seen. And so we're doing a lot of great work. We appreciate what you're doing here in the state of Utah, right? Like, that's my biggest thing here, being in Utah, for us to fly out and come and work in this state, right, is that I think this state should be a lot more red than it is, with a lot less squishy members. Like, that delegation should be hard conservatives like Mike Lee. And, your governor too. Like, I want to see true conservatives in Utah, and I think it's going to take a lot. And that's why, the APP is just launching our program to get into Utah and help Utah families.
Well, we want to see it too. So Utahns, get involved, come fight for the families. It's not enough just to go to church, but be involved in this.
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.